Good afternoon and welcome to our May 15th, 2023 meeting of special populations. I would like to say how excited we are for today's discussion, talking about disengaged students and what you all are doing to address those issues. Very, very important to me, and I'm sure to everyone out there. Before I go on, I will have my colleague introduce herself. Ms. Yang will not be with us today. She is celebrating her daughter's graduation, so we'll be missing, yes, exactly. So yes, we'll give snaps to that. So Ms. Harris, if you want to introduce yourself, and then we can go around the table.
Good afternoon, everyone. Lynn Harris. I use she, her pronouns.
Good afternoon, Lori Christina Webb. I'm Chief of Staff for the board.
Good afternoon, Juan Ramos, Administrative Services Manager.
Good afternoon, Steve Neff, Director of Pupil Personnel and Attendance Services.
Good afternoon. Buenas tardes. Vicky Parkan, Acting Director for the Department of English Learners and Multilingual Education.
Excellent. Thank you. And I'm Rebecca Smondrowski, Chair of the committee and representing District 2 on the board. Before we get on to our topic, do we have any questions, comments, concerns about the minutes and informational summaries from last meeting?
No.
All right, then we will move that along. So today we're looking forward to a lively conversation. This is a critical topic, as I've mentioned. We have fairly high graduation rates, but we also have another set of students that don't graduate or graduate in 5 years. It's a concern for all of us. Pushing the state to include students who graduate in 5 years has been a priority. It hasn't happened so far, but we'll keep trying. And until then, we need to do everything that we can to make sure all of our students have the opportunity to graduate in 4 years if possible. And the best way to do that is by showing up. So I will turn it over to staff to hear about what you guys have been working on.
Well, thank you. And do we have the slides?
There you go.
There they are. Can we go to the next slide, please? All right, so good afternoon again, and thank you for having us here. Today, we're going to be addressing and discussing 3 overarching questions related to truancy and dropout prevention, the engagement of our students. So we are going to begin by identifying who our disengaged students are. Next, we're going to share some strategies on how we are engaging our disengaged students. And finally, we're going to provide you with information that addresses what we are intentionally doing to impact chronic absenteeism. We will begin by reviewing some trend data on this group of students that has been gathered over the past few years, pre and post-pandemic. And once we see and understand the data, we will discuss the challenges that are faced by many of our students leading to their disengagement from our schools and some possible solutions to this. So I'm going to turn it over to Steve.
So thank you. You can go to the next slide, please. So these are data that we've shown and shared in a variety of contexts, in meetings and in other ways. And just to reiterate or clarify what the bars are, the blue bars are the attendance in the last full year, pre-pandemic. The orange or red bars are the last school year's data, which was our first full year in person, and then the gray are this school year through the first semester. And what you can see, and what is concerning to us, is that the attendance has not bounced back to pre-pandemic levels, and even into this year, we continue to see a rise, or at least a flattening, of the attendance data across our service groups. And as we've seen in quite a few of our data points in MCPS, there are certain groups that are, disproportionately represented or disproportionately high in terms of their chronic absenteeism compared to other groups in the area. And as Vicki said, we're going to get into sort of some of the reasons why and to talk about what are some of the strategies we are engaging engaging in, but equally importantly, or perhaps more importantly, what are some of the strategies that we are seeking to further engage in, perhaps in a more cohesive manner moving forward? You can go to the next slide.
Mr. Neff, can I just
Yes.
ask a quick clarifying
Sure.
question? How are we defining chronic absence?
Thank you. I mean, that's always good to do that. So chronic absenteeism is 10% or more, you are absent 10% or more of the days in which you are enrolled, and excused or unexcused does not matter in that data point. So in a 180-day school year, if you're absent 18 or more days, you are considered chronically absent. And again, it does not affect the data whether those absences are excused or unexcused. And then as we look at our service groups, similarly, they are disproportionately represented in our chronic absenteeism data in terms of both pre-pandemic as well as, what we've seen in the last year and a half since we've been back in school full time. So we're gonna, Vicki and I are gonna take a look at some of the reasons why and then what some of those strategies are. So I'm gonna turn it back to Vicki.
All right, next. Four categories, buckets, boxes, that we think we can categorize students as to who they are. The first group, we start with our EMLs, our emergent multilingual learners, where, as you just saw in the data, we have over 35% of them chronically absent. If we consider that we currently serve over 30,000 EMLs in our schools, that accounts for over 10,000 students that are chronically absent in this service group alone. According to the Cal report, which we have shared here, absenteeism was certainly an area of concern. They stated in their report the proportion of Latina students who are chronically absent tracks with the proportion who do not graduate on time. And we know that's about 76% of our EMLs are also Latina students. So there's that group of students. We have also identified issues that impact our absenteeism rate related to the relevancy of our programs, safety, and concerns with work priority, all driving our students' attendance. And all of these areas are areas that in an ELD plan, English Language Development Implementation Plan, that we began to develop following the Cal report and presentations here to the board are part of that report. We're conducting some cross-office work to address some of these issues. Can we go to the next slide, please? So the next question we've asked ourselves, and this has come up with a variety of stakeholders that we have engaged with, is why? What is keeping our students from engaging with their schools and their education? So in considering the groups of students we've identified, we understand the following about each group. Our EMLs, we begin with the lack of understanding due to language barriers. In 2022, more than half, or 50%, of our EML high school students were designated with an English language proficiency level of 1 or 2, so our beginning levels of English language. Moreover, as was stated in both the Cal report and the anti-racist audit, many of our students feel disconnected from their school experience. So we are in the process and currently have developed a series of resources available to our newcomer students through the International Admissions and Enrollment Office, in collaboration as well with Montgomery County Department of Health and Human Services, to support our newcomers, but we know that more is needed. In terms of relevancy, we find through numerous surveys, focus groups, and conversations with our high school students that many of them feel a disconnect with their high school academic experience. The question they often ask themselves is, why is this important or relevant to me? How does the coursework prepare me for my future? Why do I need this course? We all acknowledge that our world is changing and changing fast, so we need to identify ways to address the relevancy of our courses to ensure that they meet the needs of the students that we serve. Next, we have identified concerns with safety. So whether real or perceived, this is a concern that has been shared by many of our students and or their parents. Students' fear for their safety is in many cases impacting absenteeism rate, because if I'm afraid, if I think something is going to happen to me, chances are I'll stay home. And finally, a concern that's very, very relevant to our EMLs, our emergent multilingual learners, is their need to work to help support their families. Again, as we have spoken with some of our community partners, Identity, the Black and Brown Coalition, this has come up. There are basic needs that need to be met related to housing, food, childcare, to name a few. Because most job schedules conflict with our school schedules, students must choose, and jobs usually take priority. We find that even before high school, students are often needed to provide childcare for younger siblings so that parents can go to work. In addition, many of our students, even starting in elementary school, are needed as translators for doctors' visits, appointments, and other basic needs within their households. Next slide. So we have identified numerous challenges specific to our students as they enter or transition into high school. When EMLs first arrive at our schools and until the credit validation process is complete, they are initially enrolled as ninth grade students in ninth grade courses regardless of their age. This can have a negative impact on students when older students, 17, 18-year-olds, are enrolled in classes with 13 and 14-year-olds. 3, 4, 5-year differences can be very disheartening for our older students, again, making them question the relevancy or value of being there. While we make efforts to help students and their families acclimate to our schools, there is so much to know and to understand, including how to access supports that are available, but often or not always accessed. Sometimes because of language barriers, not to mention cultural differences that also present challenges, particularly to our newcomer students. Course options and opportunities are another challenge. One issue for our EMLs at all levels is as a result of the ELL access, the yearly English language proficiency assessment, those results are usually not available until around this time. Actually, we just got them last week, so mid-May. At this point, most middle and high schools have developed student schedules, and our EMLs may not be able to access courses of their choice because of the scheduling timeline not aligning with the MSDE timeline for the ELP assessment. Students are then enrolled in courses that may not be of their choice, and again bring up the question of relevancy. How is this course connected to my future? We have been working over the years on minimizing the impact of the transition from middle to high school for our students. High schools offer opportunities for 8th graders to visit and meet staff prior to arriving in August into the high school, yet this transition continues to hinder students both with feelings of being overwhelmed, safety concerns, and just not feeling like they belong or a disconnect from their school experience. And finally, as shared earlier, many of our students with high absenteeism rates begin working when they enter high school. So there's that, issue of work, support, help your family, or go to school. The issue that was brought up with the anti-racist audit, not feeling welcomed or accepted in their schools. And for some, again, this fear of a very large high school that, they may not ever have experienced before. So I will turn it back over to Steve.
I just want to ask a quick question. Yeah, I know that the course options issue with the scheduling and everything is something we've talked about multiple times. Is there anything that can be done about it or anything that we are currently doing?
Unfortunately, schools begin articulation in January, sometimes even late December. And so students select their courses, and while it seems like, well, the ELD course is just one, it's just where it may be offered. So if this year I'm a level 2 student, I have options, 2-3 different periods, but in May, I find out that, and we want this to happen. Now I am a level 3 student, so those options have changed and may conflict with other courses. I know this was something we discussed previously, and the students take the test in January into February, and the state does not provide the data until we received it on May 10th. And so that's when schools.
Do we let the students go ahead and schedule their classes under the assumption of where testing might end up coming out and then alter it if need be? Or is that something that?
That's a really great question. And I think that's kind of school specific, but it's something that, you could do, okay, well, let's assume you may stay at this level and let's play out this second level. The issue is, I think about Gaithersburg High School where you have hundreds of students, that becomes almost
Too much.
unmanageable for whoever is working with the students to work, develop their schedules.
Okay, thank you.
Just following up on Ms. Mondrowski's question, so we have this disconnect in the timeline that interrupts the ability of students to really plan for the next school year and causes issues. Just have we found in our work with our EML students that there's anything we control that is a decent proxy for how they do on these tests that we typically use to level them?
Unfortunately, the ELL access that they take is very comprehensive because it's testing listening, speaking, reading, and writing. And so it becomes, I think, something very challenging. Some teachers may be able to predict.
Right, that's what I was going to.
But sometimes, and we're finding this even now as we're getting the results, teachers that are like, no, he can't be, still this level. I know their speaking should be higher than a 1.0. We don't know how they performed. It's like many of our assessments, right? It's what you did on that given day at that given time, which doesn't always speak to what they may know. Sometimes it speaks to the kind of day you're having and how you perform. But we really don't have anything that beyond really what a teacher could recommend. And I'm sure there are many teachers that do that, that help students as they're registering and signing up for courses. But I don't really know if at the high school level in particular, if students would be allowed to register for courses that.
I had just thought maybe like the people who are performing the test, for example, if that's what they're doing all the time, they could have a general idea and say, okay.
Well, that's the ELD teachers.
Right. So I would be like, here's where I would recommend you sign up for classes so that you're in the mix, and then if we need to change it, we can. But
Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess this gets to just a foundational question for me. Is the ELL access testing results, are those like that's what determines a student's level for the next year? There's no other way, so it can't be, they take that test in January, they have another semester of learning before the school year ends, and there's no variance, there's no way that the progress they make from January to June can be accounted for in their determination of their EML level for the next year?
I think because the assessment that we're using is aligned to the WIDA standards, which is aligned to how, we provide the resources that we have for our ELD program, that's kind of what we have. So, and I agree. So you're kind of stuck in this difficult place, because if you think about a student testing in January and then having 6 months of instruction that hopefully should also move them along, but at the same time, if we do the assessment any later, it would create an even bigger issue in terms of registering for their courses. So, but maybe it is a conversation that we could be having with the high schools in particular about, what would be some options.
As it seems like that's a conversation we have to have because we know what we're doing isn't working.
Right. And,
lot
there's
of-
also issues of staffing around some of the courses. So we're making projections ourselves because the staffing goes out earlier, before we have the final data. Schools got their staffing already. And an ELP level 1, 2 student would be accessing 2 periods of ELD services versus a 3 or 4 that only has 1 period. So there are just so many moving parts, pieces to all of this. And unfortunately, our students are getting hit hard with all of that.
Thank you.
So you can go to the next slide. And again, good afternoon, and thank you for this opportunity. A lot of our discussion and focus today is going to be on EML and newcomer students. But we used to, state when I used to work in the Department of Special Education, that good specialized and scaffolded instruction that is designed for students with disabilities benefits all. So when we talk about some of these strategies and we talk about this approach, our focus today will be on the EML and newcomer students, but the strategies can and will be applied to all. So I just wanted to mention that when we saw at the very beginning of this school year, the data that I showed you a few slides ago, that it looked like we were not bouncing back at the start of the school year, we knew we needed to come up with a comprehensive approach to attendance. There was not going to be a single strategy that would address the need. So we really intentionally, and Vicki mentioned cross-office collaboration. That's almost an understatement in terms of what we did in the fall and the winter. We really met with quite a few different stakeholder groups that each had their own focus, many principals involved, many different offices across central office. We did meet with a parent group and a student group, and you'll see in this slide later that we have plans to meet with many more. And we purposely met with them with the idea of having them help us build the components of a plan versus us hiding out in the laboratory, creating this really comprehensive plan and then pushing it out saying, tell us what you think. And so we met over the course of many months, several meetings where we would share components, we would rework them, we would share them for feedback. And we got to a point where we felt like we have a plan in place that is comprehensive. And we really spent last month and part of March sharing it with the Deputy Murphy's leadership team, and so that they could give us feedback in terms of the scalability of the ideas. And the one thing that we were most concerned about or focused on was we wanted to make sure that whatever we presented was integrated into the other key initiatives. So the Pathways to Success for college, career, and community, the anti-racist action plan items, the school improvement work planning work that is being done. We wanted to make sure that anything that we presented wasn't a standalone, something else for schools to do, because it really is very appropriately embedded into all three of those, because there are parts of every one of those initiatives that need to live in the attendance plan. And so we've continued to build and revise our action plan, almost on a daily basis. We have plans for this month and next month to take it out to both internal MCPS stakeholder groups so that they can really dive into individual sections and tell us what resonates, where does it need some work, what do we think our first next steps are. And then we're also going to take it out to other staff groups, student groups, and community groups in sort of a broader context of, we feel like these should be the components, the major components and the major action items of an action plan. And again, what do you see that's missing? What resonates with you? Do you see yourself? Do you see your children? Do you see your classroom represented in this plan? And if not, it is very much going to have to be a living document that we will continue to build and grow. And then, so our goal is to use time over the next month and a half to really get to a point where we have an action plan that we're ready to share with schools in early July for their leadership planning that helps to delineate, because first of all, we know we're not going to be able to do everything all at once. But there is some low-lying fruit that we can ask schools to do immediately. And then what are some things that we can ask them to do as they're, working through some of their earlier initiatives in the first semester, some of the more medium-term items. And then there are some longer-term pieces as well in the component that will take more comprehensive and extensive planning and thinking in order to implement the longer-term action items. So you can go to the next slide, please. So our comprehensive attendance action plan is broken into two major components, and then each one of those has two subcomponents to them. The first major component is, what are we going to ask school teams to do? And the first one is the preventative strategy of thinking about the action items and the action steps from the anti-racist system audit. And if we think about the language that Dr. McKnight used in her speech a couple weeks ago, I think she used, students feel wrapped in a blanket of welcoming or a blanket of belonging, I think she said. And you can hypothesize that if students feel like they are wrapped in that blanket, they're going to be more compelled to want to come to school. Even if, they might love school, they might not love school, but if they feel like they belong, they are going to be more likely to attend. So there are learnings that can be gained from the data from the anti-racist audit, although we will acknowledge that it is now back about 18 months. From focus groups that they do with students now, specifically affinity focus groups of students who may have absenteeism issues, focus groups with parents whose children might have absenteeism, gathering data from focus groups, as well as looking at their school-specific data, because each school is able to take a look at their chronic absenteeism very easily, in Performance Matters, and see how are our different focus groups doing. And so each school might have a unique group that is struggling with attendance, and even broken down with what you can see in Synergy, just knowing their communities. So what are some things that schools can do and classroom teachers to do to be welcoming? Vicki mentioned relevance. Do you see yourself gaining value from showing up in school every day? Because you realize that when you're 21 and 25, what has happened during that day is going to benefit you as a young adult. So we really want them to think of just the preventative and the culture and climate piece. There is a culture and climate piece and a component and a wellness component in the school improvement plan, the new school improvement planning documents, and that's intentional because really attendance, relates to both of those very directly. And then the second part of the school-based expectations around attendance is we want each school to continue and then to further develop their individual school-based attendance intervention plan. So what is our plan for how often we're going to gather data, how often we're going to analyze it and monitor it, what is the group going to be, who are the group going to be composed of, how often are we going to meet, what are our outreach strategies, like what are the cutoffs or the thresholds where we start to reach out more officially. There's always the expectation at the classroom level that as soon as students start to miss, or maybe it's the beginning of the school year and they haven't come yet, teachers are expected to reach out. But then what are the next level strategies in terms of letters or text messages? What are the promotional efforts we're going to make at the beginning of the school year in terms of emphasizing the importance of regular school attendance? And then what is going to be the mechanism? And in many cases, it's the student well-being team. Many schools have done an offshoot of student well-being team that is focused on attendance only, and really having them work through the root cause analysis, because Vicki gave a whole bunch of reasons why. There are many more than that. In order to best intervene, it's to figure out for each family or each student why, and then what can we apply as a school system? How can we collaborate with the family? How can we collaborate with community partners to try to address that why or address those barriers? And then to better support schools in these efforts, we realize that there is some central office support and creativity that can be applied. And most of this is really to high school students, and it's really to many of for many of the students that Vicki mentioned. We know that we want to continue to increase the amount of instructional options for students. And I feel like a broken record because I say this all the time. The regular 7 period a day during the school day doesn't work for everyone. And some of the reasons, Vicki gave some of those very reasons, when she was sharing. And so can we continue to build upon what works in online pathways to graduation and the virtual academy and things that are happening in the graduation validation group that are school specific, things that are happening in CREA? How can we continue to build upon and grow and advertise those so that when students don't feel like either the morning through the afternoon in person is working for them, or maybe it can't work for them for some of the reasons Vicki said, whether it's childcare or needing to work or something like that. What can we offer them? We have brought out to the executive leadership, and there was general interest and somewhat enthusiasm around, do we want to look at a virtual night school as an option for students, both as initial credit seekers and also as makeup credit. And we have, designs to sort of beat the bushes for people with the historical knowledge to find out, many years ago we had it, and then it got discontinued, and really, try to reach out to some of our resident historians and figure out, or decide what were the reasons behind that. I'm sure some of it was financial, and I'm sure some of it was, who is taking advantages and what's happening. But what can we learn from that as we look at the possibility of building another option?
I thought we already did that through our alternatives programs. I thought our alternative program offered evening and even weekend type courses.
They were starting to, but I don't know that they do now. And I think, and even when they did, that was still for a pretty finite group. And right now our process as an alternative programs is sort of a referral and review application process. So we think there is some merit in looking at making it open even wider to a more.
Yeah, I thought it was an opt-in program now, and
Right.
so people can apply because it's just a better fit for them than the comprehensive traditional school. And I'm disappointed and surprised to hear that we've stopped offering things like the evening classes and stuff, because that was the whole purpose of having an alternative educational option.
Right, so we feel like if we pull together a design team and we are able to plan for that in advance, then we have the staffing and the financing and we have the infrastructure to be able to set it up as not something that a school is doing sort of in addition to, but it would be a program in and of itself. So that is clearly one of the longer term options because, you know, it'll take some time to work through a lot of those details. You can go to the next slide, please.
I just wanted to.
Sure.
Light.
So, I mean, interested in what you just said, looking at kind of resuming this kind of virtual night school option, not as an add-on, but as a kind of a standalone. So, just clarifying question. So that would be looking at, that would be where a student would be enrolled, as our virtual academy students are now enrolled in the virtual academy, and they may still be assigned to their home school, but they're not at their home school except for certain specific purposes. So this would be looking at having that standalone, so that the student that needed that night option, that would be their enrollment option. They wouldn't also be a student of Northwood High School who's not showing up during the day and is just taking courses at night. They would be a student of the virtual night academy or whatever we called it. Hello, Mr. Monteleone.
Hi, Ms. Harris and Ms. Mondrowski. I just popped up here, and I hope you don't mind,
Not
Steve.
at all.
So I really appreciate Steve and Vicki talking about this, right? And it's interesting to me that, right, this is really a district-wide issue that we're dealing with, and it cuts across every single office, central office, and all of our schools, and really in our community, right? And we've seen a shift in culture, I think, around attendance. And so there's not just one fix that we can look at, whether it's alternative classes, a different attendance policy, warmer, more nurturing, inclusive classrooms. We need all of this, right? So I appreciate the fact that these two are here as the face of this, but I felt it was incumbent upon me to just kind of chime in a little bit here. I think what Steve is sharing with you, Mr. Neff, I'm sorry for the informalities for those, everybody at home. So what we really have had our eye on this, certainly since last year a bit, but there were so many other reasons and mitigating factors with operations and COVID since the beginning of this year. And Steve referenced all the folks that he's talked with. And I wanted to say that before we really wanted to do some front-end input, some thematic thinking, right? Before we went into a lab and put up an action plan, what are the things that our communities want to see in whatever we develop? And so, we do have a pretty comprehensive eight-page draft, right? Beyond just what you see on your slides, clearly not ready for public consumption, and it is continuing to go through the feedback loop. So I heard Steve mention that we brought this for ODS, and so we shared across all of the chiefs and associates, right, that work under Dr. Murphy's side of the shop, and they gave us good feedback. And now there are different pieces of this that we are going to go back and get significant, I think, deeper looks into the different options. So the thing that you all are kind of talking about right now are really, I would put under this big blanket of non-traditional, innovative opportunities to earn credit for graduation. The idea of going to a night school or a virtual night school is one of them. And so I taught night school at Northwood High School before the new Northwood opened, and it was literally, it wasn't a school, to answer your question, where kids were not in their home school, they were in night school. It was a location where mostly kids that needed to recover credit. So if they had failed a course, if they missed a class, they came late to the district, they would go there and take that as makeup credit, the full course. I am not sure why or when or how that phased out. I think it was probably before 2010, to be honest with you. It was right around there. The district then went to something called credit recovery at the high school level, if you're familiar with that, which has a high degree of variability. And so the idea of a virtual night school wouldn't be necessarily as like a virtual academy, right? It would be a place for students who could say, hey, look, I want to do this internship during the day. And I want first-time credit. This isn't just something I would do potentially for a makeup credit. That internship could be at an automotive dealership. It could also be at NIH, It could be anything, right? If that's what we're looking at there. It could be for our students that work during the day or want to work during the day. And it could be for some of our students, frankly, that's sitting in class for 8 hours a day from 7:15 or whatever it is till 2:30 just doesn't work. And I've sat before this dais with you all before and stated that I really do believe that we need to look at all those state graduation requirements and think about why we're forcing our students to go through this culturally dissonant institution, right? That is modern 21st century public school, frankly. And our students are speaking to us. They're telling us this is not working. They may not be saying it here. They may not be saying it eloquently, but they're telling us. And so the night school, the virtual night school, it is right now certainly in the brainstorm infancy. But I'm glad that Steve mentioned it because this is the type of thinking I think we need to commit to. Some of the other things that we're looking at within this umbrella is that we are working with Nikki Hazel and her shop to try to get an understanding of what are all of the non-traditional ways that kids can earn credit, and not just online pathways to graduation, not just virtual academy, not just online options, but all the CTE options, the Edison options. What types of credit do the students earn for internships, right? Our vision is to get all of this in one place and to understand currently what are the ways that students can graduate without them sitting for 7 classes a day, 4 years in a row, right, with all these requirements. And let's market that, let's promote that, let's create new pathways. That's one piece of this. I think the other piece is what Steve said about the audit data tells us what we probably already knew, and our students and our voice data that we collect and the focus groups that we do with parents all the time tell us what we already know. For many of our students, school is not a safe and inclusive place, right? It is not a place where they feel welcomed, where they feel warm, and even if they do have good relationships with their teachers and they feel valued, sometimes the instruction at the high school level isn't engaging, frankly, right? And so we have to do that front end work. We have to build places where our kids and our families want to come. And so this is there's that front end piece. There's that other piece about the virtual schooling. Now, in between that, there are things that we are currently doing that we need to do better. And I think our student well-being team and the data dashboards and some of the work that we've done, we have to be able to, every school, and they will through the new school improvement plan, with that, we have these 2 goals that Steve spoke of with culture and well-being, and we are currently finalizing what the metrics will be for this. So all of this is happening, but it's the right work. I want to say it's the right work. Anchoring, if you have attendance issues in your building as a principal, and they are disproportionate from students or not, attendance needs to be a goal in your SIP, right? And there needs to be key action steps that are accountable for folks at that level. And so there are school-based attendance intervention plans, and there's a lot of work that has gone on there, but there's a lot more work that needs to be done. So that's a third part of this large plan, right? Alternative credit-bearing options, making school a welcoming place, tightening up the school-specific intervention monitoring processes. But there's one other kind of big elephant in the room, and that is the grading and reporting policy. So I'm speaking with you all, we're having a conversation here. A big theme that we have heard from teachers and from principals is that there is all this accountability for attendance on principals, on counselors, on PPWs, on everybody except for the student. Now, I'm not saying that with any type of subjective or value judgment. I'm telling you what we have heard. And so there is an interest in thinking about, is there a way, being mindful of what the anti-racist audit said, being mindful of the inequities that we have seen in previous grading and reporting policies, is there a way to have attendance as some sort of component of a grading and reporting policy? All right, I'm going to go back and I will speak as my former self as a high school principal, but also based upon the information we have heard. In our current policy right now, if a student gets a C, first quarter, third quarter, they can fail the course the subsequent quarter and pass it with a D. If students are able to, essentially many students are not coming, I shouldn't say many, some students have played the game and are not coming for the second or the fourth marking period. And so we have some of our staff that are saying they show up, they get a C, and then I never see them again. There's really nothing that we have. Now, I say this as a public forum. I'm stating to you like what the themes, the feedback have been. So with that in mind, this is certainly an issue that we are wrestling with. We do not have an answer for this yet. I'm giving this all to you now instead of coming to a board meeting with a fancy plan, because the plan is in our notebooks, our Chromebooks, but we're still wrestling with some really difficult issues. So this is literally a culture shift. There will be some technical things we need to do, and we are doing them. But there will be some interesting conversations down the road, and we need to think innovatively, right, about those non-traditional options. I gave you a lot there, but I wanted to be very clear, and I want to make sure that Steve's work was represented.
I appreciate that. Couple of things about that, though. Number one, you made the comment, we need this to be something that we're committed to. Everything that you just talked about actually kind of makes me feel disappointed, because I feel like I thought we were committed to this. We've been talking about this for a long time. When we changed the process for alternative programs, when we said we're going to, really focus on those kids who are disengaged in school and find out why and offer them another opportunity. We opened 2 new sites. We made it very clear this is not for disciplinary action. And I still talk to kids who don't go to school and have no idea that there's an option for them to participate in an alternative program where they don't have to sit in the classroom. They can kind of work a little bit more at their own pace. They can potentially take some online classes or whatever. So I don't understand why I feel like we're starting over again. I just feel like that's an MCPS thing sometimes, where it's like, why are we reinventing this wheel? Why aren't we just scratching off the edges and figuring out how to make this be what it should have already been, in my opinion, and what it has the potential to be going forward?
Yeah, respect to the alternative programs, that as I think you all have visited recently or this year, that's happening, and that is absolutely
right.
We have these 3 sites. And students are to get to the Alt 2 level, there is a very formal process that students go through at the school, where they have to be elevated, and there's an Alt 1 meeting, and the student goes into Alt 1 at the school level. So it's a.
But we changed that. We said any student who wants to apply can apply. They don't have to be picked out by their school. They don't have to be referred to. If a parent wants to put in a COSA application for the alternative program, they can.
Certainly. So this would be something that if we need to then market that through our counselors and our PPWs and things like that. So I certainly will flag that for myself and the Alt 1 team and the counseling team as to and we can add that certainly to our body of options here. But I think we're thinking about a number of options and what would work for students. So like the alternative setting is like you are in that alternative school. That becomes your school. And I think one of the things that we're thinking about is how can you be in your home school and maybe take 2 or 3 classes during the day, and then also be able to access those other courses in the evening or when they're suitable for you. So it's a little bit of a hybrid. And I do want to say we are absolutely committed to this, and I think like a lot of things, the pandemic taught us a lot, it caused a lot, and it's causing us to go back and ensure that we are changing and tightening everything we do around issues such as attendance.
Did you have something?
Yes, hi. I just wanted to add, as it relates to the attendance issues, certainly, and the grading and reporting, we made a lot of changes during the pandemic to err on the side of students, and we are hearing a lot of feedback from teachers and from parents that it's time for us to go back to some of the policies that we had pre-pandemic, because we are seeing the impact. Yes, and so that is we have a committee, grading and reporting committee, that's looking at that. Now, some of the things we started to adjust, but the one that Mr. Monteleone raised is a big one that we know we need to go back and take a look at, whether it be attendance or the 50%, whatever, it is impacting how students are engaging, how seriously they're taking some of their courses, and showing up. So that is something that is being addressed through committee, a work group at this time, involving school-based staff and central office staff and community members. So that is on the radar. And I also, as we talk about the night school and the virtual component, we do want to look into, again, what would attract a student to coming in the evening? As we, of course, we know the impact the pandemic and virtual instruction had on a lot of our students. And so, unfortunately, those are the same students that we've got to get back. So we just want to make sure, as we look at a virtual instruction, that it actually is the right method to attracting and having those students be successful in school.
Well, that's one of the things that I like about the alternative program model was it was somewhere where they could actually go and have an instructor there, but be working on an online type of thing so that they could kind of move at their own pace, similarly to the way the students work at RAP.
And I would just add that in terms of our EMLs, the virtual option is oftentimes not
Right.
what is in their best interest.
Right.
And so we really have to be open to, alternatives, thinking about the time, but also, what that opportunity looks like. Because if I have to work, but my option is to engage virtually, I'm not sure if that's a good alternative for, again, speaking specifically to our students that are, developing their English language and trying to understand a lot about how just the school system and their families, really, how, our school system works, so.
Yeah, I just want to just really be clear. Mr. Neff said that as one of the things that is floating around in the conversation. So I don't want to make sure. I want to make sure we're not leaving you with the impression like this is our silver bullet and we're going to do this and it's going to fix everything. And I think like some of the things that they're about to get to here are more specific to, right, the emerging multilingual learner. But this is complex, and we are really in the weeds with this right now. This entire thing.
Mm-hmm. Okay, sorry to have, I'm going to ask one quick last little interruption question, but when you guys are talking about your focus groups, where exactly are you finding the students, for example, that you're talking to? Because I want to hear from the ones that aren't in school. So are you going to their homes? Are you showing up at their work? I talked to some students because some youths, I should say, because I'll be out to lunch and they'll be working and I'm like, don't you go to school? And they're like, no, we do this instead. And I'm like, okay, well, how can we help you change that? That's where I'm finding the kids who aren't showing up at school. So I'm just curious where you're finding them.
Sure. So, and ours, I think I'll answer this more in how we're finding them in terms of where we're finding them. But
Well, that's sort of
I
what
think
it
the
is.
where is a great question as well. So I reached out to Vicki and her colleagues because we definitely want to meet with EML and newcomer students because we want to get their feedback on, our broad components of what the action plan is. And again, do they see themselves in it? What resonates and what do they think can help improve it? Also, I've reached out to pupil personnel workers and counselors and are asking them to identify students who are chronically absent who would be willing to participate in focus groups. We'll offer them SSL hours, and just so that we can get their feedback as well. We recognize a lot of times we go to our student government groups and our student leaders, and that their information is important as well, but we do want to get to the students that we're talking about. So we have plans to identify students and those staff members who have relationships with those students, typically the counselors or PPWs, see if we can get them to meet with us and share with us what their concerns. And in fact, there is an attendance plan that we're thinking about as one of our possible action items as it relates to the grading piece and the attendance intervention at high school we're talking about. And one of the components of that is having that dialogue with the student, asking them what are the barriers and what are some things that school staff can do to help eliminate those barriers, so that we can get individual information so we can help that student in a targeted manner. But Mr. Montaloni is right. We keep hearing additional feedback, and our plan keeps getting more comprehensive and more comprehensive because there's nothing close to a silver bullet. It's going to have to be multiple components.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And I would just add that I know when we first received the Cal report, we gathered some student feedback because that was shared with us. And so we went to the schools, to the middle and high schools, and convened focus groups of students. But, it's interesting now that you asked the question, well, what if the kids are not coming? Now, one of the things we did was we sent out a survey, and one of the questions had to do with, what is it that brings you to school? And then what are those things those barriers that maybe keep you from coming to school? So we have some of that data. But I know also through our work with Identity, who's one of our partners, they have done, they have conducted also groups, and they do it definitely not during the school day, sometimes after school, evenings. They have different groups that they work with. And so, we've gathered data that way too, in terms of what are the barriers for students. And one of the major ones that came through from them was this issue of many of our students having jobs that they needed to go to. And, between paying the rent, eating, and again, going to school, this took priority for many of them. So that's where we got some of the data.
Okay.
So I appreciate the dialogue, and I actually feel like our presentation is interrupting, not you, Ms.
Oh, no.
Because it's just great dialogue, and we really do only have a little bit more information to share, before we continue the dialogue. One of the things I just wanted to highlight here is the PPWs, and particularly the PPWs assigned to high schools, as well as the high school counselors, their first priority when they see, and their first option when they see students who are disengaged, they really do try to re-engage them into what the school and the school system can offer. But there are times when there just aren't great matches, and so I would almost call this otherwise engaging them, because these are some agency partners and that we connect with that allow students to do the things they need to do, whether it's to get internship experience or work, and work towards a GED in most cases. So we're really, all of the PPWs at the high school level sort of have this tool at their disposal, and whenever the re-engagement to the high school itself conversation isn't heading in the direction they want, they start to think about, well, what are your interests, what are your needs, and they look at possible options from this list, and this is not an exhaustive list, to try and keep kids engaged in their education in some way. Really try to dispel the myth about, GED, is not good compared to a regular high school diploma. Really, like I said, trying to keep them engaged in their education in some manner, even if it's not going to be into that, in person in high school. Next slide, please. So again, I think we've summarized this, but when we have been developing our plan, and part of that stakeholder work that was done on the front end is it allowed us to think about many different components, and it very quickly became apparent that there isn't a single thing, a single strategy that is going to address it. It's going to have to be multifaceted. And so as we're presenting this to the deputies leadership team and others, we're very conscious of, we don't want to play the blame game. So we don't want to blame parents, you need to get your child to school, blame students, you need to come to school. Blame principals, make your schools more welcoming. Blame teachers, make your school classes more engaging. We really feel like there is an opportunity for everybody to have a significant amount of responsibility. And Mr. Montanone mentioned accountability. Like, there is accountability across the board if we are really going to fix this. And again, I think that accountability highlights some of the major components of our plan. Asking administrators to really focus on making their schools positive, welcoming learning environments. Asking classroom teachers to make sure their classrooms and their instruction is relevant and engaging. We do need to engage our parents, and we need to ask our parents to be partners in this. So it's not a blame thing, but it is an outreach, and it is an expectations. And in the plan as it is developing right now, a lot of it is on older students, particularly high school students, because that is where our data lies. But we also recognize, and perhaps there needs to be a greater commitment to this in the plan itself, is thinking about kindergarten and first grade, and really that's when those habits get started. And so, what would stop us from creating like a really tight plan in kindergarten and really catching it early and trying to educate parents and support parents, because there's education around, kindergarten is very different than what people might remember it to be in terms of how intensive it is academically, how important it is socially. And so just treating it with the importance that it deserves. And also just teaching around, these are the kinds of maybe health reasons why your children shouldn't come to school, but if it's a cold or sniffles or something like that, maybe they can come. So, and I think that the principal, the parents at that stage, especially as they're going through it the first time, they're looking for that information and they're able to engage more. And I think if they feel welcome to do that, I think they'll want to send their students more. And then we do want students to take that accountability, even though you can right now with our current grading policy, do the strategy that Mr. Monteleone described with this first and third quarter C. We don't want them to think of that as a viable or an effective strategy, and we want them to just take agency in their education. And everything is interconnected. If we offer more relevant options and opportune options, then they see the value, and then they're not trying to figure out a way to sort of let me work the plan because I'll still get my credit at the end of the semester. And then we do realize that we place a lot of responsibility on, or a lot of expectations on, our school-based administrators and staff, and there's just so much support that we can give them from a central office standpoint in terms of helping them and supporting their student well-being team implementation, including the MTSS platform, and then really just creating for them and brainstorming with them options for students for whom the traditional day doesn't work. So you can go to the next slide. And so finally, just tying it back to the Anti-Racist System Action Plan, as we've noted and we've said today and has been said before, there are families out there, there are students out there who do not feel as welcomed and seen and as heard as others, and it stands to reason that they wouldn't be as diligent in getting their children to school when that's the case. And so how can we use our data? How can we use current street data that we get from focus groups right now? And then how can we use our quantitative data around attendance to identify systemically what are the students, who are the students who aren't coming to school, but really in each of our 210 schools taking that data and say, what does it mean for our neighborhood and our community, and which are the students that student groups that we can focus on proactively to encourage and welcome. Next slide. So again, we appreciate the opportunity to share this. We look forward to continuing to share where we are in terms of building out our plan. And as I said in the very beginning, the clear intent is to build it into the initiatives that are happening now, because that's where it belongs. It's not a standalone.
Well, thank you very much for this presentation. I really appreciate all the work you all are doing on this and are going to continue to do. I know you had that timeline slide up, but just out of curiosity, when would be a good a reasonable expectation for us to put on our schedule a follow-up with the plan? I mean, it's already 8 pages. I'm excited to see them. And when could we look at some sort of timeline in terms of a follow-up on what we're doing and how it's going?
So our timeline is to be able to have something on attendance. What is that thing? It's still being done, but something for the 23-24 school year that we can be sharing with principals. So I would say, towards the end of the summer. And I'm not sure what your committee dates are, but I mean, we're looking at certainly for something to be able to share with schools before pre-service.
Well, that's exciting. And I just want to really reemphasize the fact that we have spent time and money and resources on expanding our alternative programs to be the type of option for those who the traditional comprehensive high school doesn't work, or even middle school. And I would love to see us not just toss that out with toss the baby out with the bathwater.
So the one thing I will for sure be walking out of here with is a conversation with Mr. Ranby about that. I think that even with, say, a full capacity, right, at those sites, they have about 75, 80 seats max per site. And while that would, that would certainly make a dent.
I know it's not the,
It's
but
a lot.
it's just, to me, seems like a very money already added to area that we could at least use as a way of examining whether or not something could work at a full high school. So just kind of an easing your way into things, but just my personal 2 cents. So, Ms. Harrison, do you have anything you wanted to add?
Yes, thank you very much for this. And such an interesting conversation about an issue that I feel very passionately about. And just to start, one thing, I mean, I know Mr. Monteleone and I have had this conversation, and he knows I share the belief that, we're at a tipping point in public ed generally, but here in the state of Maryland, and we were doing all this blueprint work, but our MSDE rules and credit requirements are still locked in 1950s edge-speak, and they're not serving our students well. And every single thing we make a kid do to get a high school diploma, this is the time we should be asking why. And if there's not a good reason, it needs to go. And that, to me, to my mind, very much includes pushing back very hard on the way we view Perkins funding and the regulations and restrictions that attain to Perkins funding, because again, that is also linked in 1950s edge-speak, where a kid was college-bound or not, and there was just nothing in the middle. And because there are lots of great opportunities that could truly engage students, but we make it such a burden for them to take advantage of, because any of those Perkins-funded classes or course sequences particularly, they can't get a credit for that. They can get, if they also take a half-credit elective, they can get it to count as their completer. But they can't, even if it's a science-heavy, like case, they can't get a science credit. If it's, communications-heavy, like, TAM, they can't get an English credit. And who is that helping? It's not helping anybody, and that kind of thinking needs to change. And so I just appreciate that, and I would love to see this school system go very directly with that very clear message to the State Board of Education and say, we need to transform the way we are doing this business, and let's do it together. And I also wanted to just think, I know back in January at our first operating budget or CIP hearing, I can't remember, maybe it was operating budget hearing, we had testimony from a 10th grade student at RM, Naya Bonsall, who came forward, and her message was, I was a newcomer to this school system. I've also been a newcomer in other school systems, and you guys need to do a lot more to help students and families that are just coming into this educational system. And to her credit, she's assembled a group of students from all across the county who share her experience of being a newcomer, and they're working with Dr. Murphy's office to create a set of resources that schools can create that are informed by what newcomer students and families say they want and need when they first come to the school. And they have their own ideas about how students in the schools can be a real resource for newcomer students to help them feel welcome and included and just help them find their way around and have a friend. And so that I really applaud that work is going as I'm not sure 5 years ago, this school system would have really welcomed that opportunity and seen value in it, but that's happening now, and I really appreciate the way that we are embracing the wisdom and experience of those students because they know what will help make this a better experience. And so one of the questions I had, this follows on something that Ms. Mondrowski asked earlier about the comprehensive attentive access plan and the focus groups that we're doing. And I did notice when you had a list of organizations that we've partnered with on one of the slides, and a couple that I didn't see on there that I thought would be highly relevant to this work of really being trusted brokers and people embedded in the community that families would maybe trust first, engage with first around issues related to the schools. And there were CASA and the Street Outreach Network and Luis Cardona's group in the PYD team. And if we haven't been reaching out to them to help us reach and connect, I think we definitely want to do that. Because I think one of the things that we need to get to, among many, and you're identifying there's so many swirling issues around how we can really support these students to truly succeed. And one of the things I think is how do we do that dance, that collaboration with students and families coming from all kinds of other places and coming to Montgomery County. And if you talk with them, they'll have multiple reasons that they left where they were and they came here. And often one of the things they'll say is for the educational system, for the schools. But I think what we haven't necessarily done is to help them understand that there are reasons that we're successful in our education system. And the reasons that we're successful in our education system is because we're different from the education systems that they maybe experienced where they were and found less than satisfactory. And so one of the things that is we have a school year, an arc of the school year, and it's successful because we largely expect kids not to be coming in and out and in and out, but that if you're going to make a big family trip or something like that, you're going to do it during the windows of time when school's not in session, and that's not their experience or something that's been emphasized where they've been, and that's just how do we sort of work with our community partners to help families sort of have that next level understanding of how educational systems do what we do here, and how we can partner with them to make sure that that their students have the maximum opportunity to be successful and still make sure that they are engaging with their family in ways that feel meaningful, even if that includes trips going back and forth and things like that. Because I've talked to so many principals over the years who've had didn't know how to communicate with families that actually it was a problem for them to take their kids out of school for 4 weeks right after the holiday break. Actually there was going to be some learning loss. Actually, there were going to be some reentry issues. And so how do we work through that in ways that, help those students to succeed and find, that the schools are a place that they really want to be. And so those trusted community brokers, I think, are our friends when it comes to navigating that sort of learning curve about how, the educational system and how it works here, because it's different from where it works in other parts of the world. Anyway, just an observation. And I really, when we're looking at, I think the focus groups of students and families that we're really looking to put together, and in a way that is informing the development of a plan instead of asking them to react to a pre-created plan. I think it's so important because that's going to help us, I think, crack some of the nut about you were talking with Mr. Monteleone about the students who, that, they've cracked the code. They know they can come for the first, semester, the first marking period and the third marking period, get C's, pass the school year with a D average, and move on to the next thing. But helping come to a better understanding of, is that serving you well as a student? What is that going to get you at the end of this educational journey? What is the value of a half-attended D, content mastery level education for what you want to achieve with your life in the end? And so helping that to be, and that has to be a two-way conversation. How do we make them see that school in whatever form it looks like? And again, you're right, the traditional come, put your buns in the seat for 7 periods all day long, and then go home at the end of the day, that it works for some, it doesn't work for all. We have to acknowledge that. We have to provide additional options and new and creative and innovative options. But the message overall needs to be education has value. Right. And learning, and getting sort of an education that is sort of not just focused on certain specific, learn how to do this thing, learn how to do that thing, and then walk out the door at the end, but that there is a value in having sort of a broader education that helps you to think critically and engage with the world, and then be ready to be part of the world when you leave us, instead of be prepared to do a very narrow window of things when you leave us. And so, but how we do that has to be informed by how they see value and what prepares them for the world and what they want to do when they enter it. Because a lot of these kids come with us with skills that are pretty important already. Their resilience, their language skills, their, ability to, succeed through difficult things. So, yeah.
I know if this truly is a discussion, I would just say, Ms. Harris, I've had that conversation, right, as a teacher and a principal many times, right, about why this is important, why you need to be here, speaking with parents. And I know we are off in the philosophical stratosphere at this point, but I would just say that the reasons that we believe, right, as a 20th century culture of people around this table, as to why it's valuable, doesn't resonate as much as it used to. And I think it goes back to your point about, is what the state has developed 50, 60, 70 years ago, that hasn't changed since I was a child, right, in the 70s and 80s, and probably my parents in the 50s and 60s. If it hasn't changed since then, and it was built for a hierarchical, paternalistic, male-dominated, largely white, monolithic culture, mainstream culture, it's I guess my point is, it's harder for our PPWs and our counselors and our teachers who care enough to even have the conversation, right? First of all, to sell that, right? And I mean that, and we really are at that. And I know that, I know you have kids and you talk to kids all the time, and I'm struggling with my own senior who feels like anything he needs to know, he can just find it.
Correct.
Right? So there's this transactional nature, this transactional culture of this perception of knowledge that is based on accessing as needed in many of our children today. And so we really are at this place. And we're going to do everything we possibly can up here with everything that is existing, Alt 1, what we can go back to, tightening policies. But we are at a cultural precipice right now in education. And I think oftentimes your children in your classrooms and your middle schoolers and your high school students are the canary in the coal mine, right, as to what is coming in society. So I would just, I know you all believe this, and I know you also have advocacy channels with those at the state and other folks, right, that might be able to pull these levers. But I do think it is a position that LEAs and school boards should consider advocating strongly for and expanding what this looks like for kids.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I appreciate you saying that, because I think it's, how do we have that create that culture shift that's addressing I can find whatever information I need. You can find it, but do you understand it? And do you understand it enough to use it? And how is that building your capacity to, you wouldn't want to go to a brain surgeon who was like, okay, I'm just going to look this up right now, and then I'm going to cut into your skull. You really do need a different depth and level of mastery. And so how do we have that conversation that there, it's a difference in looking something up right now and actually having a deep understanding of it, and being a critical consumer of it, asking a critical thinker, somebody who doesn't just swallow it, but is like, why? And I think a lot of that's on us too right now, because we need to ask a lot of why about why we do what we do and how we do it. And maybe that, the fact that we're being open about that right now, maybe that will help influence the conversation with students who are our customers, but we're asking too. We are asking the same questions. But what we don't want to do is prepare a generation of students who are skating along the surface of understanding pretty much anything, because that makes you so vulnerable to everything, being taken advantage of in pretty much every aspect of your life when you don't have a deep understanding of anything, or that critical thinking piece. This is,
We're very, very grateful for all of the work that you've done on this. And like I said, I appreciate your flexibility in having the conversation as opposed to just the presentation. And that's much more my style. I feel like it's a lot more productive generally. So thank you very, very much. And I want to thank everyone who is watching and listening, because I'm sure there's an abundance of people out there spending their Monday afternoon with us. But I look forward to continuing this conversation when we do have a chance for you all to come back and share with us kind of what you've done through the summer and what we're thinking we're looking at going forward. So,
Always happy to. Thank you.
Great. Thank you all very much, and I appreciate it. And with that, we will be adjourned.